What's going on, guys? Welcome to my in-depth Yae Miko guide. This Goro-stalking, sassy mama has held a warm place in our hearts since the moment she was introduced. In this guide, I will discuss her playstyle, talents, constellations, best weapons, artifacts, team comps, and rotations. While this is my first Yae guide, I felt the community was due for an update with a plethora of new reactions and team comps at our disposal. If you enjoyed the video, please consider commenting, and subscribing as it helps me out an absolute ton. Additionally, I stream Monday to Friday on Twitch at twitch.tv/Trevito Gaming. Come check out the community. With that being said, let's get right into it. Kicking it off with playstyles. Yae Miko is the kinky Kitsune favorite fox lady we all daydream about. She is an extremely flexible Electro unit who mainly sees use as an off-field DPS unit or in quick swap focused teams, but can also be played as an on-field driver in a variety of team comps. Her playstyle is centered around her totems, Kitsune spirits, and lightning. Let's take a look at her kit, artifacts, weapons, and teams she can be played in, and emerge victorious with newly found knowledge, right here, right now. Moving on to talents. Normal attack. Yae Miko can do up to a 3-attack combo summoning her Kitsune spirits. As a Catalyst user, she is dealing electro damage with her normal, charged, and plunge attacks. Her normal attacks hit in a small area in front of her and have a standard ICD, so she will apply electro every third hit or every 2.5 seconds. The AoE hit is large enough to hit multiple enemies and will easily trigger hyper blooms in front of her. Her charge attacks have no ICD and a stamina cost of 50, and although the wind-up animation can feel long, it can be cancelled early by a jump or dash. In addition to her charge attack has a rather long range as it travels to its destination. It'll actually hit and deal damage twice to enemies with a large enough hitbox. Elemental skill. This Electro Mommy's most important part of her kit. Let's break down the different aspects of it. When you cast her skill, Yae Miko dashes a short distance, placing a totem where she dashes to. Do note that the dash itself to place a totem does not have any iframes or resistance to interruption, but can be performed in all 8 directions. When the Sakura totems are placed close enough, they will be linked together, and linked totems will increase their damage multipliers. Be careful not to place them directly on top of each other though, as summoning a new Sakura totem will destroy the existing one. There is a visual indicator showing which level the totems are, and which of them are connected. At C0, a totem starts at level 1 and gains a level for each linked totem. Proper totem placement is important to maximizing her DPS. You should always try to make sure all 3 totems are connected. The link cannot be in a long straight line, as only the center totem will reach level 3. I recommend placing them in a triangle formation, as you will then easily connect all of them. The Fox Lady skill has 3 charges and only 3 totems can exist on the field simultaneously, even in co-op. These totems will periodically strike a random nearby opponent with lightning, dealing electro damage up to 5 times per totem over its duration. In total, it's 15 instances of damage with 3 totems. Each skill charge has a duration of 14 seconds and a 4-second cooldown, so you can have permanent uptime on her totems. Her totems have a standard ICD and will apply electro or trigger a reaction every third hit or 2.5 seconds, and they will generate 1 electro particle per 2.5 seconds. Important to note, her skill does not snapshot. Elemental Burst. Yae Miko summons a lightning strike dealing AoE electro damage. She will sacrifice the currently active totems and transform them into Tenko Thunderbolts, dealing up to 3 additional massive hits. These hits do not have an ICD, so every hit can trigger a reaction, which is especially nice in aggravate teams. Her Elemental Burst has an energy cost of 90, which is very high, and also a long cooldown of 22 seconds. Because of her high burst cost and long cooldown, it is generally recommended to burst once every 2 rotations and focus more on her offensive stats. I will cover the teams and rotations later in this guide, stay with me. Moving on to passives. A1, the Shrine Sacred Shade. When Yae Miko casts her burst, each totem sacrifice resets the cooldown of 1 charge of her skill. This essentially means that you can immediately resummon the 3 totems you sacrificed with her burst. A4, Enlightened Blessing. Every point of elemental mastery Yae Miko possesses will increase her skill's damage by 0.15%. This passive makes EM a more desirable stat and helps her skill damage in reaction-based teams where you want to build some EM anyway. When it comes to talent leveling priority, it's pretty straightforward. Start with your skill, follow up with her burst, and then you can do her normal attacks. Normal attacks can be leveled if you want to play her on field, but can be left at level 1 if you mainly want to use her as an off-field DPS. Moving on to constellations. C1. For each Tenko Thunderbolt activated from sacrificing a totem when Yae Miko casts her burst, she will restore 8 energy for herself. A huge quality of life boost that lowers her ER requirements. Very noticeable in teams where Yae wants to burst every rotation. ER requirements will still depend on the teams you play her in. Constellation 2. Yae Miko's totems start at level 2 when created, and their max level is increased to 4. It also increases their attack range by 60%. Unlocking level 4 totems and higher multipliers increases the damage output by a significant amount, and the additional range can be a nice quality of life upgrade. Constellation 3. Increases Yae Miko's skill level by 3. The extra levels to her main source of damage. In my mind, a pretty decent constellation. Constellation 4. When Yae Miko's totems hit opponents, electro damage bonuses increase by 20% for the entire party, including herself. A good constellation for electro-focused teams like Taser or Aggravate. More on that later. C5. Increases her burst level by 3, a straight damage buff. C6. Her skill's totem attacks will ignore 60% of the opponent's defense. This is similar to the effect of Raiden C2 and is a massive DPS increase. However, do keep in mind this only affects her skill and not her burst damage. Overall, her constellations have some good value all along the way. There is no very clear stopping point like some other characters have, so if you want to go for her cons, you'll be happy to know that every single step of the way will be an okay increase. C6 and C2 being her most valuable ones. That being said, they are by no means required. She is a fun, foxy, fully functional, and flexible unit without any cons at all. Moving on to weapons. Kagura's Verity. Yae Miko's signature weapon and best in slot. The passive is tailor-made for her kit, buffering her elemental skill damage and giving all elemental damage bonus at 3 stacks. The buffs also last for the entire duration of the Tenko Thunderbolts from her burst. This weapon is her strongest option regardless of playstyle. Due to the amount of damage percent that this weapon gives, attack percent stats become a lot more valuable to balance her overall stats. 1,000 Floating Dreams. Nahida's signature weapon and a very strong option in Dendro teams where you want the elemental mastery. It can also be a good option if the entire team appreciates the EM, but it is generally not recommended outside of teams including a Dendro unit. Skyward Atlas. Who would have thought that a standard banner weapon made it this far up the list? The reason is that because Yae Miko cannot snapshot buffs, the high attack bonus from this weapon can be very valuable as a stat stick. The passive can easily be triggered by normal attacking before you place down your totems or casting burst. Typically Yae Miko's second best weapon option outside of Dendro reaction teams, and overall a great option. Lost Prayer to the Sacred Winds. Another standard weapon and another strong stat stick with high base attack and crit. You will never really see full use of its passive, if at all, but the crit rate is appreciated enough to make this a very good choice. Memory of Dust, another attack percent stat stick, but you cannot stack the passive when being off field, so this weapon is only worth using if you play Yae Miko on field and with a shielder. It can shine in niche scenarios if the conditions are met. The Widsith, an amazing 4-star option and competes with 5-star weapons at higher refinements. It is generally her best in slot 4-star weapon, although the passive can be desynced between rotations and not activate when you would like it to. It can also be the optimal weapon for speedruns if you care to roll the dice and get the preferred damage percent buff out of the 3 passive options, making her burst hit like a truck. Solar Pearl. Battle Pass weapon and a strong option if you on-field your Yae Miko, and also a solid option when off-field. You can easily activate the passive by weaving in normal attacks before casting your skill and burst. Sacrificial Jade, another Battle Pass weapon, and synergizes with an off-field playstyle. Yae can't use the HP percent of the passive, but she will appreciate both the high crit rate from the weapon and the EM part of the passive. Flowing Purity, Fontaine's craftable catalyst, a strong stat stick with a high base attack and attack percent, and with a passive she benefits from. Probably Yae Miko's best free-to-play option, especially if played with a healer that can clear the Bond of Life. Oathsworn Eye R5. An event weapon that is a strong option for Yae Miko if you aim to burst every rotation, as it's a combination of an attack percent stat stick that also practically solves her ER requirements. The drawbacks are that you may not have played back when the event to obtain this weapon was around, and you may see better use of this on another character. Wandering Evenstar, a weapon that sees okay value when using EM Sands, granting you attack based on your elemental mastery. It also buffs your other party members by a portion of this value, so it has some support utility if your teammates want more attack buffs. Black Cliff Agate. Purchased from the Star Glitter shop, this passive is very situational, so this weapon should be treated more like a Wid Sith without the passive. Your Star Glitter is most likely better spent elsewhere, but this can be a solid option if you have nothing else. Mappa Mare, a craftable weapon giving her all the stats she wants, but with a passive that requires her to be on field to trigger it. It can be considered her most general free-to-play option and is a decent option in teams with Dendro reactions. Hakushin Ring, another craftable weapon and free-to-play option, and good for her ER needs if you want to burst every rotation. A good option if you want to play with another Electro unit on the team that can utilize the buff. You need to be on field and also trigger a reaction for this weapon to see value of its passive. Favonius Codex. This weapon really makes Yae Miko's personal damage take a hit, but it can alleviate energy needs both for herself and her teammates. If you plan to burst every rotation and have teammates that are very energy hungry, this can be a solid option. Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayer R5. It's a fine option as a temporary weapon if you have nothing else or if your goal is to buff another unit. However, Yae Miko contributes a substantial amount to the team's overall damage when properly invested, so you should aim to use a DPS weapon on her instead. Moving on to artifacts. For artifacts, there isn't a set that is tailor-made for Yae and always significantly above all other options. It will depend on your playstyle and what teams you want to play her in. Your general go-to will be a 2-piece combination, but other options may be better for reaction-based teams or strictly off-field DPS. 4-piece Golden Troop. Its 2-piece effect increases elemental skill damage, and its 4-piece effect further increases elemental skill damage when the user is off-field. This is Yae Miko's best in-slot set for an off-field DPS role and very competitive for other playstyles as well. It boosts her skill damage a lot, which is her main source of damage of her kit, but with the condition of requiring to be off-field. Yae Miko's burst becomes a less valuable part of your rotation using this set, contributing less to the overall damage with a set where only substats contribute towards the burst damage. 2-piece. Your typical do-it-all build. Use a combination of Thundering Fury for electro damage, Golden Troop for elemental skill damage, any attack percent set, emblem set to meet energy needs, EM set to meet breakpoints. General go-to would be 2-piece Thundering Fury plus 2-piece attack, with Kagura's Verity 2-piece attack plus 2-piece attack often becomes preferable. 2-piece combinations are often substat dependent. Choose your best option either with personal testing or by using an optimizer. 4-piece Gilded Dreams. The 2-piece effect of Elemental Mastery and 4-piece effect giving more EM or attack percent buffs when you trigger elemental reactions based on the party member's elemental type. This set can be Yae Miko's best in-slot in reaction-heavy teams such as Aggravate, as it also synergizes very well with her A4 passive. Gilded Dreams is also one of the best set options you can go for if you play Yae as an off-field Hyperbloom trigger. Do note though that the set effect has to expire first before it can be reapplied, which can cause uptime issues and desync on her totem shots and ICD. The 4-piece effect activation is also delayed by ping, so with high ping you can potentially lose out on a few buffed hits every now and then. The point being, although this is Yae Miko's theoretical best in set for Aggravate and reaction teams with 100% uptime, it can lose its advantage to better substat 2-piece combinations based on the buff uptime. 4-piece Emblem of Severed Fate. The 2-piece effect of energy recharge and 4-piece effect of elemental burst damage. It can do well in teams where you want to burst every rotation, and where you can stack buffs to make the burst hit for a lot. Otherwise, generally not recommended over other options mentioned. 4-piece Thundersuver. The 4-piece effect increases your damage against opponents affected by Electro by 35%. Theoretically, one of her overall highest damage sets, but the requirement to have a constant Electro aura on enemies can be hard to maintain. It is also very unlikely that you have a good enough 4-piece set to compete with the better substats of a 2-piece set. So I would still recommend those. However, if you have a cracked out 4-piece Thundersuver, feel free to use that. 4-piece Thundering Fury. Yae Miko does not benefit much from the skill cooldown reduction, so the only effects she gains from the 4-piece set are the increased reaction damages. These reaction bonuses can be made up for with EM stats or by using the aforementioned 4-piece gilded set. Most likely, this set is better used on other Electro units. If you want to play Yae Miko as your designated Hyper Bloom trigger, you will have to play her on field and use your normal attacks to hit the Dendro cores. Your main stat priority will be Elemental Mastery, since Hyper Bloom damage scales strictly off your character's level plus EM. The sets you should consider using for such playstyle are 4-piece Gilded Dreams, 4-piece Flower of Paradise Lost, or a 2-piece with EM and EM stats. When it comes to stat prioritization, attack, electro damage, and crit is optimal for most builds and teams. EM, electro damage, and crit is possibly her best for aggravate teams, and EM, and EM is optimal for purely Hyper Bloom teams. Attack or EM Sands for aggravate. The EM you want to aim for in aggravate teams will be in between 100 to 300. The set effect of a 4-piece Gilded Dreams alone is enough to reach the lower end of the threshold you want to be at for aggravate, but oftentimes it's also worth going for an EM Sands. Remember to factor in other team buffs as well. Of course, if your attack percent Sands has better substats, that most likely will be worth using. Yae Miko's energy recharge needs are gonna change a lot depending on what teams you play her in. It'll generally be between 100 to 140% if you burst every other rotation with an additional Electro unit in the team, and 140 to 160% if you want to burst every rotation with an additional Electro unit. If she's the solo Electro user on the team, bursting every other rotation, the ER requirements can range from 140 to 180%, and then it can be as high as 200 to 220% if you want to burst every rotation as the solo Electro unit. Different characters have different energy generation, so the ranges are quite wide and it's hard to say exactly how much is needed. Test what works for you and your team, or get some recommendations when we talk about some of our teams soon. When we're getting into team comps, Yae Miko is a very flexible unit with a ton of team options, so it'll be hard to cover them all. I will get into some team building principles with some examples, but just know that the sky is the limit. Basically, if a team wants an Electro unit, she can most likely be played. With that being said, she often prefers to be played with another Electro unit on the team, and one that can provide her with good particle generation to allow her to focus on more offensive stats rather than ER. She also appreciates teammates whose cooldowns line up well with her own skill duration, and who can make use of the on-field time after Yae Miko has placed her 3 totems. Moving on to team comps. Yae Miko Aggravate. This team consists of Yae, Sucrose or Kazuha, Yao Yao or Baizhu, and Fischl. If playing Yae Miko on field is your style, you should give this team a go. Fischl pairs extremely well with her in aggravate teams, working both as a battery unit for Yae Miko and as a high source of electro damage in this team. Yae Miko's normal attacking on field will trigger a lot of Fischl's A4 passive, resulting in massive amounts of damage. Slotting in Yao Yao or Baizhu as your Dendro unit consolidates both healer and Dendro applicator and is my personal favorite. Another amazing team comp consists of Yae Miko, Nahida, Fischl, and Zhongli. Nahida is the strongest Dendro option you can use with Yae Miko, granting a huge EM boost to your on-field Yae that synergizes with her A4 passive to increase totem damage based on EM. Between tagging an enemy with Nahida's skill and watching Yae's totems pop off, there's not a whole lot left to do than watch the enemies disappear in front of you. For defensive options, you can go with either an Animo healer or a shielder such as Zhongli. Zhongli's Res Shred and Shield makes it a lot more comfortable to play a squishy unit like Yae Miko, and this team is super flexible and easy to play. The next team comp I want to discuss consists of Yae Miko, Sucrose or Kazuha, Tighnari, and Fischl. A quick swap range playstyle aggravate team where both Yae Miko and Tighnari share field time. You really lack survivability and defensive options, but between staying at range, iframing, and quickly swapping between your units, you can hopefully manage to stay alive well enough to obliterate your enemy. Yae Miko Quick/Hyper Bloom. This team consists of Yae Miko, Kokomi, Nahida, and Kazuha. A super flexible Quick Bloom team that can be played in a variety of ways depending on what you need out of it. Depending on who you choose to on-field and what element you infuse Kazuha's bursts with, this team can lean more towards Hyper Bloom or more towards Quicken and Aggravate, or even Electro Charge. Yae can be played both as on-field or off-field here. When on-field, you want to actively try to normal attack the Dendro cores to Hyper Bloom. When off-field, you can electro-infuse a Kazuha burst to act as a Hyper Bloom trigger, and on-field Kokomi for faster Hydro application and more Dendro Seed generation. Fun and flexible, what more can you ask for? Oh yeah, it has Hyper Bloom, so it's quite strong too. The next team I want to discuss consists of Yae Miko, Furina, Nahida, and Jean or Baizhu. If your desire is to find a functional team where you can play your beloved Kitsune Shrine Lady with the Arcana Fontaine, this could be the team for you. It essentially works as a Hyper Bloom team, but with the buffs and potential VV Shred, you can do some serious damage as well. It doesn't work quite as well as the AFK Archon team, as Yae Miko's totems don't target Dendro cores, but a fun team nevertheless. Yae Miko Taser teams. This team consists of Yae Miko, Kokomi, Kazuha, and Fischl. A very strong, satisfying, and mechanically easy to play team with lots of numbers on screen and good sustained DPS. You can give Kokomi TTDS and make sure your Yae Miko has a huge attack buff before bursting, and you want to be bursting every rotation. As long as you refresh Yae's totems and Kokomi's jellyfish before they expire, you should be good to go. Important to note, for the Yae Taser team, your energy requirements would be 150 to 160% for Yae Miko, 170 to 180% for Kokomi, 110 to 120% for Fischl, and 150 to 160% for Kazuha. The next team to discuss is Yae Miko, Raiden Shogun, Furina or Yelan, and Jean. Raiden pairs very well with Yae Miko, essentially solving her ER requirements alone. Yae Miko is played off-field in this team. It's a fairly easy team to play and execute, but it can feel quite squishy to play, especially if you're playing Furina towards the end of the rotation. I personally think this is Yae Miko's best and most fun Furina team. The next team consists of Yae Miko, Xingqiu, Sucrose, and Beidou or Fischl, one of the classic Taser team cores. No healer, you may think. Between the damage reduction of both Xingqiu and Beidou and the Rain Sword heals from Xingqiu, you end up with a lot of survivability and defensive utility. This team feels surprisingly good to play, and you will feel very safe placing your totems down even in the most dangerous situations with all the resistance to interruption. You will probably want on-field Sucrose in this team. If the content you're up against is single target and not AoE, you'll see better results using Fischl instead of Beidou. Yae Miko is a super flexible unit with a plethora of team options, and can be slotted in almost anywhere you want an Electro unit. These are some of the teams she can be played in, but there are many more. If your team wants an Electro, try it out with Yae Miko, and let your imagination and creativity roam freely. As always, we can't cover every single team out there, so make sure to comment below if you have curiosity around different team comps. Overall rotation discussion. Typically for rotations, regardless of what team you play her in, you want to set up your 3 totems, then swap to the rest of your team for their abilities and on-field time, then swap back to Yae Miko to burst or refresh her totems. Then you restart the rotation or continue with the rest if it's a longer one. On-field versus off-field bursting every 1, 2, or 3 rotations. On-fielding Yae Miko can lead to a very flexible playstyle, often very quip-swapped oriented. It can be dynamic and fun, weaving in normal attacks and squeezing out a little extra damage at every opportunity you find. You also have more weapon choices when playing on field. However, positioning is very important on her with how squishy she is and how much she relies on her totem damage. She is also providing generally less DPS than other common meta on-field DPS units. Playing her off-field, on the other hand, is more safe and easy, with consistent and permanent Electro off-field damage. However, she does require some noticeable field time to set up her totems and casting burst, which will somewhat extend the rotations. Her burst cost being as high as it is, with how little energy generation she has, can also lead to high ER requirements. Additional rotations and tech tips. In particular, for an on-field playstyle, when it comes to normal attack combos while spamming left click, there is a completely viable option, and here are some things you should know. The third hit of her normal attack combo does not smoothly transition into her charge attack. If you want to incorporate charge attacks into your rotations, you should use the following. N2CJ/N2CD. 2 normal attacks followed by a charge attack cancelled by either a jump or a dash is her primary on-field attack combo for damage. N1CJ/N1CD is 1 normal attack followed by a charge attack, has a higher DPS but also higher stamina usage compared to the N2C combo. N1E. Normal attacking once before placing a totem takes almost no extra time at all and can be used to get an extra Electro application to trigger an aggravate, proc a weapon passive, or just squeeze out a little extra damage. N1E, E, N1E. One normal attack before using 2 of her totems, then another normal attack followed by her last of the 3 totems is Yae Miko's most damage in the least amount of time, and can be very useful for on-field playstyle or when you have off-field units that need more normal attacks to activate their ability, notably aggravate teams or when played with Xingqiu. Both her N1 and N2 can be walk cancelled, meaning that if you hold the forward movement key after inputting them, you will cancel the last part of their animations, allowing you to perform your next action faster. The initial shot from a totem happens very rapidly after being summoned, so it is possible to cast her elemental skill right as the totem shot fires, overlapping the Sakura totems so the new one replaces the old, thus resulting in faster damage application. Not a significant or practical DPS improvement, but it is a fancy little trick that is possible to do. Although the totems target single targets only, they do have a slight AoE hit if enemies are grouped close enough together. This can be nice to know when deciding which teams to play her in. So now you understand how Yae Miko works and how to build her, but the most important question, should you pull? Yae Miko is undeniably an incredible off-field electro applicator with a variety of different uses. It is hard to ever refer to any unit as a must pull, but in this case I think it depends on what you're lacking in your team comp. If an insane electro damage dealer / enabler is what you're missing, go for it. If you feel Fischl is suiting that role for you and you're not particularly interested in her, it might be the right move to save. In the end, the personal needs of your account and characters you enjoy will always outweigh a unit-specific kit. As always though, if you are spending, make sure to stay within your means and be responsible. Thank you guys so much for watching my in-depth Yae Miko guide. I tried to be as thorough as possible to create a complete guide that can serve those seeking assistance for many years to come. If you are interested in the Goro stalking Electro Mommy that is Yae Miko, I wish you the best of luck on your pulls. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking, subscribing, and hitting that notification bell to stay updated on all future guides. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.